Hi, my name is Jason Debney and I am Coordinator of the Thames Landscape Strategy. The following presentation provides a brief introduction to an exciting new project of ours called Rewilding Arcadia, launched by Sir David Attenborough at the 25th anniversary of the Thames Landscape Strategy. The project looks to the Thames corridor in the upper reaches of the tideway above Chiswick and the lower sections of the freshwater river downstream of Windsor. Its focus is the remarkable landscape known for centuries as the Arcadian Thames. Rewilding Arcadia is all about rethinking the floodplain as the climate emergency continues to change the river environment, increasing flood risk and altering established habitats and recreational patterns. In the future, managing flood risk will be more than simply building walls. Traditional defences such as embankments and barriers will have their place, but in the face of climate change and the need for sustainable approaches, the role of floodplains has to be revisited. The Arcadian Thames is characterised by high-quality publicly owned open space, a multi-layered landscape of parks, gardens, historic houses, towpaths and wildlife sites. Many of these open spaces are located within the statutory floodplain, both on the tidal and freshwater river. By their very nature, they should be places that are resilient to flooding. However, previous land use decisions have seen much of the wildness of the Arcadian floodplain lost through modifications to the river channel and its floodplain. Over the centuries, much of the Thames has been modified to aid navigation, provide places for development and to protect communities from flooding. As the river has been canalised, much of the dynamism and diversity of the natural floodplain has gone. The Thames has been tamed. As a result, the floodplain's capacity to function during a flood has been greatly reduced, to the detriment of wildlife and recreational use. At the same time, public perception towards the purpose of floodplain has shifted, as spaces that were historically regarded as wet are now managed as dry environments. Unexpected but quite normal flooding causes great surprise. Urban populations are no longer connected with wildlife and the natural world. The intrinsic relationship between the dynamism and function of the river floodplain with the communities that live alongside it has almost disappeared, as floodable places have gone. To a large extent, the loss of the natural floodplain has not been a problem. The climate emergency, however, has altered the balance. The river is reclaiming its floodplain back. Flood risk is increasing. Along the Arcadian Thames, this is starting to alter established recreational activity and damage wildlife sites. The Arcadian Thames is at risk from a fluvial flood moving downstream, a tidal surge coming from the sea, and a combination of both. The Thames barrier is currently used to protect London from a tidal surge and to protect the Arcadian landscape from a fluvial flood meeting a high tide. It cannot be used to protect both at the same time, however. Flood risk models indicate that its use to protect the Arcadian Thames will be greatly reduced in the future, as the barrier will be needed to protect central London. At the same time, change in rainfall patterns and the paving over of much of the Thames catchment is set to increase a peak fluvial flood at Teddington by anything up to 40%. The Environment Agency has predicted that the Arcadian Thames is at a particular risk from flooding. Time is now running out to do something. Throughout much of London, measures to reconnect people with their lost natural floodplain are limited due to the high flood defences that run along the riverbank to protect development built in the floodplain. Upstream of Chiswick and below Windsor, however, the river is managed in a different way, with flood defences being located well away from the riverbank. Because of this, the Arcadian Thames has a floodplain that has the potential for restoration. The floodplain may appear completely natural, but it is in reality a highly modified environment and, as said, largely managed in a way more suited for a dry place. Rewilding Arcadia sets out to restore some of the lost functions of a natural floodplain in order to reconnect wildlife and people with their river, to demonstrate and promote an understanding of the multiple functions of the floodplain through a series of environmental measures and educational projects, working in partnership with communities, authorities and practitioners. At its heart, Rewilding Arcadia is about helping the river to reclaim its floodplain back in a managed and sustainable way, restoring the natural processes and habitats that once governed life along the Thames. In this way, a whole series of additional recreational, economic and health benefits can be achieved. This is possible as there is a lot of publicly accessible open space that is undefended along the river, communities that care about the Thames, and forward-thinking authorities who are open to exciting new ways to manage the fragile floodplain. In the future, we're going to have to live with water. What is wet now is likely to get a lot wetter. We already do this in places along the Arcadian Thames, such as here at Syon Park, the last reach of natural riverbank in London, and at Richmond Riverside, where businesses located in the floodplain are always ready for water. It's time to stop talking and make the changes that are needed to respond to climate change in order to prepare the floodplain for the climate emergency. We need to make space for water to provide sustainable multi-use floodplains for people, wildlife and occasionally for water. This means restoring our floodplains back to a more natural state, particularly in places where wetland habitats and natural riverbanks have been lost. A range of solutions to manage increasing flood risks have already been looked at, including the construction of new flood walls. This image shows the height that a flood wall would need to be in Petersham, for example, and the lowering of land to create extra flood storage capacity. Both options have been rejected for now on cost-benefit analysis. There is little scope for new floodplain creation either, or flood relief channels along the Arcadian Thames. We would need a new floodplain the size of Oxfordshire to make a difference. The measures taken to manage water upstream of the Arcadian Thames and in the outer estuary is therefore important. Rewilding through natural floodplain restoration is our best option. Whilst it would be impossible to carry out a complete rewilding of such a highly modified floodplain in the largest metropolitan area in Europe, there are 4 key rewilding principles that need to be followed. These are to recognise that people, communities and livelihoods are key. Rewilding is a choice of land management. It relies on people deciding to explore an alternative future for land and people. We need to ensure that wherever possible, natural processes drive outcomes. Rewilding is not geared to reach any human-defined optimal point or end state. It goes where nature takes it. We need to work at nature's scale so that nature can reinstate natural processes and create ecologically coherent units. And we have to ensure that the benefits are for the long term, to leave a positive legacy for future generations. Rewilding Arcadia will support a long-term management plan to encourage universal access, resilience, understanding and enjoyment of the Arcadian Thames floodplain by reconnecting people and wildlife with water through the enhancement, conservation and rewilding of the natural floodplain. Alongside this mission, there are 3 aims of the Rewilding Arcadia project. The first aim is to reconnect people with the natural Arcadian Thames floodplain. This aim sets out to rediscover, value and increase understanding about the connection between people with rivers and their floodplain, using the principles of rewilding, integrated catchment management planning and climate change as a guide. It will use the role that water has in shaping the identities of communities at a local, regional and global level to demonstrate how communities, planners, policymakers and practitioners can adapt to and become more resilient to climate change. Importantly, it will encourage a range of communities and those disconnected with the Thames to have a greater understanding of the unique history and function of the Thames floodplain through a series of education, lifelong learning and outreach initiatives linked to the Making Space for Water, Flood Risk Catchment Management Planning and Rewilding Arcadia processes. A series of education and outreach goals have already been set. The second aim is all about using the landscape. This will improve social inclusion by involving people from all areas through consultation, volunteering and events to increase the recreational health and economic value of the River Thames corridor. It sets out ways to improve infrastructure such as signage, interpretation, footpaths, cycleways, bridges and viewing places in a way that fosters greater access to the floodplain and its wildlife, both in times of drought and flood, and its significance in terms of heritage, use and conservation. The third aim is the restoration of the lost floodplain. This sets out to enable natural flood management through the rewilding of some of the lost functions of the floodplain at 6 strategic locations to increase community and business resilience and enhance natural capital and associated ecosystem services. It is important to demonstrate how the river and its floodplain are a functional unit, a dynamism that at present has largely been lost, and ensure that the connections between the 6 strategic sites are enhanced as part of a holistic landscape scale conservation approach. The 6 strategic sites for rewilding are Desborough Island and Shepperton, Hurst Park and Molesey Riverside, the Home Park Water Meadows at Hampton Court Palace, Canby Gardens Riverside in Kingston, Hammond Petersham, the Old Deer Park, Kew Towpath and Brentford. Each of these 6 strategic sites will form a separate project under the umbrella of Rewilding Arcadia. Desborough Island. Desborough Island has the potential for a multi-layered floodplain restoration scheme set within wider goals for improving public access, habitat creation and new grassland management regimes to create a place that could become one of the river's top visitor destinations, being so close to Walton, Weybridge and Shepperton. The island has been identified as a priority area for habitat enhancement works both by the Catchment Management Plan and the River Thames scheme that proposes enhancements that would naturally accommodate water during times of flood. The artificial river banks of the Desborough Cut could be considerably improved through the reopening and naturalisation of the Desborough Island riverbank, including the creation of new beaches that could form a focus for family use, helping to reduce the potential for antisocial behaviour. The meadow near to Desborough Point has the potential for considerable rewilding, linked to measures to manage flood risk. A series of natural wetland habitats could be created, including reed beds, marginal planting, backwaters, scrapes, depressions and semi-wet meadowland. Second site is Hurst Park and Molesey Riverside. Here, much of the park is situated within the functioning floodplain and regularly floods. The flood risk extends to housing situated next to the meadow in the nearby estate. Although being located within the functioning floodplain, there is little connection between the river and the open space. Rewilding Arcadia looks towards reprofiling and naturalisation of some of the riverbank, linked to measures to create new areas of wetland. This would include new gravel foreshore, scrapes, areas of standing water and reed bed. The old slipway could be enhanced to create a usable public amenity, whilst creating a large beach with marginal planting. In particular, this element of Rewilding Arcadia looks towards ways that the project can be used as a mechanism to engage with local communities regarding flood risk resilience in the properties in the nearby housing. In this way, the delivery of Rewilding Arcadia within Hurst Park has the potential to deliver a series of wider strategic measures on the ground that would complement both the River Thames scheme and the Catchment Management Plan. The restoration of Higham Park water meadows at Hampton Court Palace. The trail phase of Rewilding Arcadia has been carried out over the last 6 years in the Home Park water meadows that has seen a £490,000 project to understand, open up and restore the ancient but neglected Hampton Court wetlands that date back to the founding of the palace. The next stage in the restoration will see further access enhancements to open up the landscape and continue to carry out environmental improvements such as reed bed management, tree planting and coppicing. The rewilding of Canby Gardens riverbank. Canby Gardens has suffered from decades of gradual decline. Today, the accelerating effects of climate change are starting to alter flood risk patterns to the lower sections of the garden near the river. In response, the Royal Borough of Kingston has been working with the TLS and they have commissioned LDA Design to develop a master plan for the restoration of the gardens. This exciting project is the first phase in a long-term plan to create a diverse, well-used and accessible public park at the heart of Kingston. The project sets out a series of measures to enhance the open space that will include the measures needed to make the riverside resilient to climate change. This includes an exciting proposal to accommodate both cyclists and walkers on a restored raised promenade that frees the riverbank and the lower sections of the gardens up for rewilding. It is proposed here to create a natural riverbank that will provide a diverse habitat for a variety of species to thrive along, whilst being resilient to increasing flood risk. At Ham and Petersham, the Thames Landscape Strategy project is called Where Thames First Rural Grows. The area is at significant risk from flooding, being at the junction of the tidal and fluvial rivers, with the statutory flood defences located at a significant distance from the river. As such, large areas of public parkland, historic gardens, wildlife sites and footpaths are located within the functioning floodplain. The area offers considerable potential for rewilding to conserve its character, recreational use and flood resilience. TLS Aspirations propose a series of measures to manage the floodplain, with the creation of new backwater habitats linked to the main river channel. The scheme details ways to link with the aspirations of the London Borough of Richmond to enhance walking and cycling through the creation of a series of discrete dry routes that would be connected to wider habitat creation goals. This dry route would extend from Petersham Meadows, through Petersham Lodgewood to Douglas Meadow footpath. From here, the route would continue to Hamilton's Ferry, alongside additional measures to enhance the wet woodland and create extensive new wetlands. Rewilding would allow us to put in place a series of measures so that the flow of water from the river to the backwaters and through it can be managed naturally. This approach would be extended downstream to Petersham Meadows. That also includes proposals for the landscaping of the concrete bund and upstream to the towpath beyond Ham Street car park towards Teddington Lock. At the same time, the Great River Avenue woodland ride could be managed in a traditional way, using heavy horses, and volunteers, and the missing link between Hamland Woods and the National Trust Ham Meadows can be recreated. The final strategic site is set out in a project called An Agreeable Wilderness. The Arcadian Thames between Richmond and Kew is formed by a series of private and public open space that are the remnants of a succession of former royal palaces and gardens dating from medieval times that today forms one of the last surviving wilderness areas along London's river. This project looks at the old deer park, the Kew Ha-Ha, towpath and the Brentford riverside. Rewilding Arcadia proposes a two-stage rewilding of this special landscape. Stage 2 of the project will look to the installation of vertical foreshore to the sheep pylon alongside the River Brent. To Kew Gardens riverbank opposite, measures to green the sloping concrete revetments would be investigated. In the shorter term, the TLS has teamed up with the London Borough of Richmond to put together a project to rewild the lower riverside sections of the old deer park, the Kew Ha-Ha and the associated wet woodland. The first stage in the project is to carry out an ecological and hydrological survey to provide a baseline about what is there. This is funded by Richmond Council and may be carried out over the summer. The flagship scheme is the creation of a new 5-hectare area of tidally fed wetlands on the lower riverside grassland in the old deer park that is currently laid out as amenity grassland and regularly floods on the monthly spin tides. Rewilding Arcadia will look to creating a series of different habitats, including areas of standing water in the places that flood the most, reed beds, scrapes, marginal areas and wet meadow. This mosaic of habitats will be designed to gradually merge into the dry amenity grassland on and above the statutory flood defence. This could become a very special place, a true wilderness, yet right on the doorstep of Richmond town centre. Further downstream, the Kew Ha-Ha is an important habitat for saprophytic invertebrates. However, it has not been surveyed for over a decade. It is also silting up, restricting water flow, and self-sown sycamore trees and Himalayan balsam is a significant issue. Diversity is being lost. Rewilding Arcadia proposes works to restore the towpath vegetation back to a more native state through the removal of the invasive species and the encouragement of a native understory. In the restored wetlands, habitat enhancement could be carried out to extend the area of wet woodland, including the creation of new areas of standing water, introduction of gravel beds to achieve riffles, flow regulation, refuge and spawning grounds. The potential for a new viewing platform will be investigated so that visitors can access the special landscape. Alongside this, other measures to increase the understanding of the area's heritage significance will be the restoration of the Kew Meridian, some interpretation, and the repair to the steps to take people down to the foreshore at the old Isleworth Ferry site. So these are the 6 strategic sites, each designed to be a standalone project, implemented and funded in different ways. The first funding bid being developed is for the old deer park and Kew Ha-Ha projects, including the new 5-hectare wetland. This is working towards a landfill tax credit scheme grant in the autumn, linked to funding from the Heritage Fund. We are also progressing the Ham and Petersham project further over the summer. We are also looking at ways to fund the education and outreach elements of the project. We anticipate that this element of the project will be carried out separately to the landscape restoration on the ground. This is running alongside the first stage of consultation to gather support for the initiative with our partners and community groups in order to fine-tune our ideas. Once this scoping stage is finished, we will publish a final report that sets out the project's future direction, including key milestones and our potential sources of funding. As you may imagine, this has somewhat been disrupted by the current COVID-19 restrictions. This film has been produced to continue our consultation during lockdown. We know that it does not replace the great work that the TLS team was doing to find out how our partners would like the scheme to progress, but it does summarise the main elements of the project. Rewilding Arcadia will always put nature first, setting out practical measures to implement strategic government and local policies on the ground. In this way, rewilding can increase community and business resilience to flooding and enhance the natural capital and associated ecosystem services that the floodplain provides. Through natural flood management, rewilding can prepare the floodplain and people for flooding, that when offered alongside more engineered flood solutions can slow, store, filter floodwater. It also has the added benefit of storing carbon. This should be seen within the context of a broader agenda to see multiple benefits in floodplain naturalisation, including enhanced recreational opportunities, habitat creation and the restoration of historic landscapes. To conclude, Rewilding Arcadia is an umbrella project to reconnect water, people and wildlife with the natural floodplain of the Arcadian Thames. We thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation.